Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to continue our exploration of our tools in Photoshop CS6, and our next tool that we're going to talk about is the pen tool, the dreaded pen tool. A lot of people are nervous about using the pen tool. It is one of the more complicated of the tools. However, you'll see that once you start using it, it is very user-friendly, and it's something that you're going to be using a lot. So once you get comfortable with it, you're going to find yourself really relying on it, especially next year when we get into Computer Graphics 2 and we're in Illustrator. You're going to be using the pen tool pretty frequently. So I want to show you some of the basics this year so that you can work with it, get comfortable with it. Next year when we get in Illustrator, you'll already have some background knowledge to work with when it comes to the pen tool. So let's get started. What I've done here is I've just opened a blank white document. Okay, you can open, I don't care what size it is, open up something that you can work on so that you can see what we're doing. And what we're going to do is we're going to select our pen tool. Our pen tool is located about 3/4 of the way down our toolbar. Okay, and it looks like the end of a quill pen that you would dip into ink in a traditional art class. Okay, we want just the regular pen tool. You'll see when you hold down on the pen tool, there are lots of options here. For today, we're only focused on using the pen tool. We'll talk about the other pen tool options in later videos. Okay, so our pen tool makes paths, not pixels. So we've talked about vector versus raster in Photoshop, and we've talked about in Illustrator that it's mostly vector based. The pen tool translates between several Adobe products. So you're going to see it here in Adobe Photoshop. You'll also use it next year in Illustrator. And a lot of the commands will be very similar. The nice thing about it being a path, not pixel tool is that we can manipulate things without worrying about pixelization. So you know how sometimes when we open up an image and we try and blow it up really big and it gets kind of fuzzy? That's pixelization, and we don't want to have to worry about that. And a pen tool works with paths very much like vectors, and we don't have to worry about pixels. So that's a really nice thing. The pen tool is a really nice tool to select. So we've been doing a lot of selecting images and deleting their backgrounds. The pen tool is really convenient for that, especially when you're trying to get very detailed things. Okay, so let's talk about some of our pen tool options. Our pen tool is used to make straight lines and also curved lines. Today we're going to focus only on straight lines, and we'll deal with curved lines in the next video. And what I want you to look at is our options bar here at the top. We've got several things going on here at the top, just like any of our other Photoshop tools. Okay, our options bar changes depending on the tool we're using. You want to make sure that your pen tool is set on path. If I click this open here, you guys can see that there are several options here: shape, path, and pixels. I want to make sure I'm on path for this tutorial. I also want to leave it on path for most of the projects that we'll be doing in this class. I will show you what shape does in a later video, but for right now, path is what you want. You'll see some of the options are grayed out. Once we get a path on our page, these will become active, so we can talk more about what these actually do. Okay, some of these should look a little bit familiar to you. When we talked about the shape tool, we had this operation here. Here it's called path operations, but it looks exactly the same as when we did the shape tool. So this will determine, as we start creating paths, how we want them to interact with one another when they overlap. Do we want them to combine, subtract, intersect, okay, or exclude overlapping shapes? Also up here, we have some alignment options, which we'll talk about later on when we get a little bit more advanced with our pen tool. And then we also have some stacking options. So very much like when we were in Microsoft Word, if I have things that are overlapping, I can choose what's on top by sending them to the back or bringing them forward or all the way to the front, meaning the very top. I've got a little gear icon here, and if I click on this, I've only got one option, and it's the rubber band option. Next video, when we start talking about curves, we're going to turn on our rubber band option so you can see what it does. It will come in big handy for those of you who have not used the pen tool before and you're having a little bit of trouble with it. We also have an auto add delete button, which we'll talk about at a later time. And then you'll see align edges is grayed out, again, because we don't have any paths on our paper. So let's use our pen tool and kind of just see what it does. So grab your pen tool over your white document, and the best thing to do is split screen this like we've done in the past. So put my little tutorial on one half of your screen and open Photoshop on the other half so you can follow along. And what I want you to do is notice your pen tool over top of your document and how it looks. Our first thing that we've got here is our little quill pen, but notice the little star next to it. This means we're starting a new path. Go ahead and click with your mouse and let go, and you're going to get a little square. This square is called an anchor point. When I go somewhere else in my document and I click and release, it creates another anchor point and then a line in between. This line in between is called a segment or a path. As I continue clicking and releasing, it will continue making anchor points and segments in between each of those clicks, okay, determined by where I click my mouse. I can continue going all the way around to where I started. Notice my mouse, or notice my cursor change. I've got my pen with a little circle, meaning I'm going to close this path. So if I go ahead and click on where I started, notice what happened. All of my anchor points disappeared. Okay, what I've done is I've created a closed path, and it's telling me that I've closed this off. It doesn't mean I can't add to it if I don't want to, but what it's asking me now is, what do I want to do with this? I've already gotten back to the start. So notice some of my buttons up here in the options bar have become active. If I click on shape, okay, I can create a shape with this. And if we look at our layers panel, we'll notice, oops, okay, that we have our background, but now we've created a new shape layer. And I'm going to undo that so that we can take a look at something else. And now I've got selection as well. So I can take that path and I can make a selection with it. And as you guys know, we do a lot of things where we need selections in Photoshop. So if I had a person on here and I was outlining the person so that I could delete the background, I could select selection. Okay, and here I've got some options. I can choose to feather it right from here. So if I've got little detailed things like hair, I can feather it a little bit. So I make sure I grab some of that stuff. And when I click OK, now I've got my marching ants. So I've made a selection with my path that I have created. Okay, so I'm going to undo that so that we're back to where we were before here. Okay, and again, my options here, you'll notice some of them are still grayed out because I don't have anything overlapping or I don't have more than one on here. All right, so with our pen tool, using anchor points and segments, we can create straight line paths, okay, that we can use for selections. We can make shapes with them. Okay, we've also talked about the text tool before. I can create a path in which I can put text on top of. So let's say I wanted to go around a shape and I wanted my text to go around that shape. I could create a path with my pen tool, make a selection, and then choose to make my text go along that selection. Okay, so just some things that you can do with this. So I've drawn another little path here, and I know a lot of times in Photoshop, to lock things in, we have to hit enter on the keyboard, and I've hit enter on my keyboard, and uh-oh, what happened? It did not delete my paths, although it appears that way. If I go over to my layers panel into where my paths are usually located, and we've talked about our little tabs over here, notice the two paths that I made are still here in my paths panel. They're not on my layer. I don't see anything. Unlike the paintbrush or the pencil, if I'd drawn it on here, I would see it on this layer. Okay, it's in my paths panel. Okay, and this is my working path, and these are the two paths that I have made. Okay, if I click on here, they reappear. Okay, so if you accidentally hit the enter button on your keyboard and your paths disappear, they are not gone permanently. All you need to do is go to your paths panel, click on the picture of the paths, and they will reappear. Okay. That said, in our paths panel here, we can work with them very similar to layers. So let's say I make a path and I'm not sure I want to keep this path. I can do a couple of things. I can drag this path down to the trash can. I can make a new path layer and work on making separate paths, which comes in handy when I want to do different things to the different paths and I don't want them all joined together. I can also make a mask with my path, which we'll talk about masking a little bit later on. If I'm on this working path, if I hit the escape button on my keyboard, notice the path is still there. However, when I start clicking again, it starts creating a new one. So it's deleting the one that I already had and creating a new path. Okay, so that's the escape button on my keyboard. When I click it, my anchor points go away, but when I start clicking again, it will add to it. However, if I hit escape twice and start clicking, it makes an all new one. Okay, so just some things to think about, some quick keys for your keyboard. All right, so escape, okay, lets me start a new path. If I want rid of those completely, I want to delete them off of there. If I hit the escape button twice, I can start clicking again to create a all new path. Okay, if I am clicking along and I hit the enter button, it's still there. All I need to do is click on that path and it will reappear. Okay guys, so very simply, that's it. Working with the pen tool is not as scary, as intimidating as you might think it is. And with a little bit of practice, you guys will all be pros by the end of this year. So next year, you're going to be a step ahead of everybody else. So just to recap, in this video, we talked about where the pen tool was located in the toolbar, what our options were at the top, how to make a straight line path with our pen tool, what an anchor point is. Remember, that's the little square, and in between the little square anchor points are our segments or path. We talked about our paths panel, okay, and how that's a little bit different than our layers panel. We also talked about what the enter key does and the escape key on our keyboard when we're working with our paths. Now what I want you to do is I want you to do a little bit of practice. So in our Box.com site, you'll see that there's a Pen Tool Practice 1. What I want you to do is I want you to open that Pen Tool Practice 1 in Photoshop, and it looks like this. Okay, and what I want you to do is open a new layer on top of this. So we're going to open a new layer. I'm going to fill my new layer with white, just like we've done in the past when we're doing tutorials and practices. And you're going to lower the opacity down. Lower it down enough that you can see the document underneath. This layer 1 is where I want you to be working with your pen tool. In our practice, okay, I'm switching back over to my pen tool with my P button on my keyboard. I want you to practice doing some straight lines. Okay, so our angled lines is our first one, very simple. We're going to click every time we get to a jagged point in the line. And I want you to try and stay on the line as much as you can. Zoom it in if you need to. Okay. For our second exercise, we're going to do some broken lines. Okay. So I'm going to, oops, what happened here? Okay. I did not tell it that I wanted to start a new path. So what it's doing is it's connecting the two together. Okay. So I'm going to undo that. Okay. And remember, if I hit the escape on my keyboard, notice how my anchor points disappear. That tells me that I'm going to be starting a new path. Also, my cursor's got that little star next to it telling me I'm making a new path. So I'm going to click and release, click and release, but I don't want to connect these two, so I'm going to make sure I hit escape, click and release, escape, and I'm going to keep working that way. Okay, so this is going to get you used to doing separate paths all on one document. Okay, and I want you to keep working through all of the exercises. When you're done working through the exercises, I want you to save using the same format we've always used and upload it into our Box.com Pen Tool Practice 1 folder. That's all for now, guys. See you next time.